Hi, welcome to Lovesaranghae with Peter and Andrea. In the next 30 minutes, we'll take you on a journey into the exciting world of entrepreneurship, relationships, and the secrets behind achieving that coveted glow. Are you ready? Let's go.
Welcome back to another episode of Lovesaranghae with us, Peter and Andrea. Today, we're diving into a topic of mindfulness, stress management, and the power of presence with an extraordinary guest, who also happens to be one of our dearest friends and a groomsman from our wedding 11 years ago. If you've ever struggled with stress, burnout, or just feeling overwhelmed with life's demands, this episode is for you. We'll be unpacking practical mindfulness strategies that can improve your well-being, enhance your mental clarity, and help you live with more peace and purpose. Let's get started. Brian, welcome.
Welcome, Brian. And before we all get started on the meat of the stuff, I want everyone here to know that Brian's been one of my oldest friends. We go back about 2 decades now, I think. I don't think I've told you this directly, but I'm really proud of what you've done and how you've grown over the years. You've gone from slinging Cat 5 cables in corporate buildings to making differences in people's lives, and that's humongous. It takes a lot of courage, and it's a humongous detour in what you've been doing earlier in life. So it's been really cool. So enough from myself and Andrea. Welcome, Brian, and let's start with your story. Would you like to share with our audience a little bit of who you are, what you do, and how you got here?
First off, I'm grateful to be here with both of you beauties. I love you guys, and yeah, Pete and I have been friends a very long time. I was fortunate enough to be one of the groomsmen at your incredible wedding, which, yeah, it doesn't feel like that long ago, but it has been a while. Yeah, so thank you, and thank you for the opportunity to share with your audience. I guess I could tell you all types of different stories about, from where I came from to where I am right now. But I think in context of this conversation, around mindfulness and wellness and things that have brought me a lot of peace and happiness and joy, it's really been an accumulation of my own journey and my own failings that brought me to this point. I reached a point in my life where I created some success in terms of what I thought success should be. Most of that was physical. Most of that was external. And within that space, a lot of freedom as an entrepreneur arose when I had some early success that I wasn't necessarily prepared for. And suddenly I had access to all these things I thought that I wanted to be. So Brian had the nice suit and, lived in a great place and the friends, and was also, very much entrenched in all the parties and the fun that came along with that. But interesting, along the way, I started to notice that I was feeling misaligned somehow, and I didn't really know what that was. There was a little bit of self-awareness creeping into my character, where I was starting to just notice, like, hey, these things don't fill me up anymore. These external things are actually leaving me a little bit more empty. And so outside of the party and outside of the fun and the shiny objects, there was lows. So the lows were getting lower and the highs were eventually getting lower. Fast forwarding a few years later, I'd started to dabble into meditation. I started to kind of look into that space. I felt like I was prompted from somewhere else to really start to look a little bit closer within myself. Unfortunately, something catastrophic happened along the way, and I had an accidental drug overdose and was in ICU. When I woke up in ICU one day, after 3 days in a coma, in conjunction with the birth of my first child, who is the light of my life, and, all of that came together at the same time. And for this big dumb animal, that was the near catastrophic event that really woke me up to start to do some more work. So I joined the Mindfulness Center not long after that, where I still am today with my mentor, Dr. Trevaux, and a number of different groups. I did a lot of work, and of course, along the way, there was many days, 1 step forward, 2 steps back, and that journey continues. But along the way somewhere, people just started to notice a shift within me, and they started to notice maybe a little bit more awareness and a little bit more compassion and a little bit more care for myself. I treated my body like a rental car for many of those years.
You can give it back and get it.
Yeah.
And then eventually I'm like, okay, you know what? Man, my why became my kids. And I'm like, well, if you're not going to do it for you, man, do it for them. And eventually along the way, you start to have more self-regard and I'll say self-love and, self-care. Every day becomes self-love, and people started to notice. And through that process, I started to help other people. So it kind of grew organically from there. And I just continue to sort of scale that to as many people as possible to present day.
Yeah, I think we all noticed it. Like I noticed. You became a lot more observant. I think you became a lot more calm. Yeah,
Yes.
yeah. And there was a turning point where I started to look toward Brian for actually opinions, observations, and the calming influence in the group, which is crazy because Brian was the vanguard that broke through all doors and parties. He became the guy that was a pillar of like calmness, which was interesting, right? What it turned out that. Okay, so let's now dive into the obvious subject, mindfulness, the science of mindfulness. And there's so much talk about mindfulness, but can you maybe break it down for us? Let's go a little deeper into what this is, what this means for you and could mean for other people.
And also come from an angle of someone listening who may not really understand this world. So what is mindfulness? What does it mean to be in that state?
And so there's a lot of, it's interesting. It's a sort of a simple practice, but it's also confusing because people confuse mindfulness with meditation, with all these other things. And mindfulness really just means, how can I be more present in this moment by moment throughout my day? And within that present moment, be observant of my thoughts, be more aware of my emotions within. How am I actually feeling right now? And doing that with kindness and compassion. And so for myself first. So how do I, because we do not speak harshly to others like we do in our own thoughts and to ourselves. We have these stories that we tell ourselves, and a lot of it goes back to worthiness as a child and not being good enough, etc. So how do I just become more mindful moment by moment? It's interesting, you mentioned stress earlier, Andrea, and really simply put, when I'm in the present moment, I'm not feeling stress. When I'm future traveling and I'm worried about all those issues coming down the pipe, I'm feeling stress. Or if I'm holding on to resentment or angry about something that happened this morning or 10 years ago, I'm not present. That's that stress, that emotional stress. So mindfulness really just means to be in the moment. So really heighten my awareness into this moment. And it's very difficult to do. We're up against 60,000 thoughts that roll through our mind every day. Most of the time, if we're unconscious, meaning we're not mindful, we attach to those thoughts, and those thoughts start to create feelings, and then feelings turn to emotions. And over time, we wire in a personality or a mood based on these unchecked thoughts. So mindfulness gives us the opportunity to really notice in the moment what's actually happening.
Interesting.
Yes. Yeah.
So I can see why one would confuse meditation with mindfulness, right? Because meditation is that purposeful act of clearing everything to be mindful, or at least to be present. But can you go a little deeper into what are the techniques that allow you to be more mindful? Like what is the difference between meditation and mindfulness, and how does that kind of manifest itself?
Yeah. Great question. So meditation is one of those tools to become more mindful. And meditation, a simple definition of meditation means to become familiar with. So when people sit to meditate, oftentimes they're like, I can't meditate because I can't clear my mind. Everyone believes that they should just sit down, their mind should eventually just clear, and they can be fully present in that moment. I can't stop my thoughts. I can't stop all these things.
People say that to me all the time.
Yeah.
Meditation's not for me. I can't do that. So what do you say to those people?
Yeah. Well, the misconception is that because you're actually noticing your thoughts, because you're noticing your urge to get up and to move, and suddenly I got to pee, and suddenly I got to scratch myself, and suddenly I need a coffee, or I'm hungry, or all of these things are, the brain uses arm and leg movement as a door of avoidance. We don't want to pay attention to what's actually happening. So if you're sitting there and your mind is racing and you're noticing it, you're meditating. That is meditation. As soon as you focus your attention and you lose your way. So there's something we call on the train or off the train with meditation. And it's a simple analogy. So if I'm on the train of thought, that means I'm just rolling through that autopilot, that script. It's almost like an algorithm, and I'm just rolling along. And then all of a sudden I'm like, oh, wait a minute, bring it back to the moment. Now I can notice those thoughts, but I'm in that moment. Technically at that point, I'm meditating. So it's not being able to stay in that place of noticing. It's how quickly can I come back when I lose my way? Mm-hmm. And over time, just like any practice, you get better at holding your attention in place. So what does that do? So in your day-to-day then, it gives you an opportunity to wake up more often. Because most of us literally spend our whole time in autopilot. Just
interesting.
And when we get stuck in autopilot, what happens then is I'm just going to continue to repeat the same patterns and programs day over day over day. And so meditation is that opportunity to strengthen our mindful attention.
So, Brian, if you're good at this, like if somebody is 10 years into mindfulness and meditation, would you be able to be mindful like as you're walking down the street or as you're working the 8 hours a day? Could you be so mindful and so good at this that you're doing this almost unconsciously, being mindful all throughout the day? Is that possible?
Yeah, well, not for me yet, but I will say that the science has proven yes. And so, there's a great book called Altered Traits, and it really broke just that down, Peter. And it basically said 10,000 hours, and they had one monk up to 60,000 hours of meditation.
Wow.
His brain was up in gamma most of the time, so he was just feeling pure bliss, like he was just pure consciousness in that moment. And yes, he had been able to just completely be. Leave it at that. So I know that's a hard concept to grasp onto sometimes, but there's moments when I get an opportunity to dip my toe in that space. And I will say this, when you get out of your own way and you are fully present and you literally surrender, that is the best time for joy to arise, for love, for your heart to open, and for new ideas and wisdom and downloads and all these wonderful things arise. I can work on a problem. I could chew on something over and over and over again, just left brain problem solving. Sometimes when I sit back and I just listen and I notice and I can create that space, boom, 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 boom. I grab my notepad after and it's just all right there. So it's fascinating how the mind works, but it's very difficult practice to stick to because, we just want instant gratification with these types of things. And it's a long, arduous journey, but there are ways to stick that out and build it into your day.
I can speak to that though, Brian. I can speak to having something that I'm stuck and I've been working towards and trying to figure it out and it's hard. And then I just step away and I go take a nap. Take a shower and I'll wake up, I'll come out and the idea is we'll just come. So it's almost like creating that protected space for you to just be in a different state.
Yeah.
So would you agree that it has to be a meditative state for this to happen, or could it just be an altered state?
I would completely agree that it just has to be an altered state. Non-ordinary states of consciousness. So anything that might create something like that. So, Pete as a runner, there's probably moments like there's a little bit of a difference. There's, for example, a flow state versus a meditative state. But at the end of the day, when you can just get out of your head and be in the moment, that could be for somebody a yoga class. That could be a walk through nature. It could be just a beautiful moment with your child or your pet or anything. But those moments arise. With mindfulness, we become more aware of those moments and we just allow space for those. We're more intentional about creating more of those spaces and just getting out of our heads and just the problem solving and ruminating on all the things that create our own suffering.
Yeah, that's cool.
That's true.
That's cool. One of the things that audience doesn't know is that Brian was one of the original, or at least I know, that's what I think anyway, one of the original proponents of cold plunging here in Toronto. So he was one of the first ones to go out there on the lake and invite all his friends to go cold plunging in minus like 5 degree temperatures. And so he's a big proponent of cold plunging and cold baths. Can you share a little bit about how that happened and why you keep doing that?
It was during
that.
Right. It was during COVID, and we were in lockdown, and I'd been doing cold showers, and I just thought I had all this time and all this space, and I needed to kind of sneak out. So I would just sneak out to the lake, and I started to practice it. And I've been a fan of Wim Hof, and then really in the last 5 years, the science around the mental health perspective of cold plunging has arisen. It's really, really exciting. And so I was just feeling extreme benefits from it, not just in the moment, because afterwards there's a massive amount of chemicals released in the body, all of that natural dopamine and things that make you feel great, that bring you energy. But really, there's two factors in context of mindfulness in my practice that really stand out for me. The first one is that nervous system response. Mm-hmm. So regardless of how strong my mindset is, if my nervous system has a trauma that is triggered by certain things, it doesn't matter how positive my mindset is or how determined I am to do something. I'm limited by my nervous system, because if I don't feel safe, if I'm in fight or flight, and some people wake up like that every single morning, all the affirmations in the world aren't going to change that. But when I go into the cold water, it triggers that fight or flight response every time, intentionally. So it's a controlled stressor on my body. My heart rate goes up. I start to hyperventilate. I overcome that with the breath in my mind. I bring myself back into that calm state. What does that do over time? It conditions my nervous system to quickly self-regulate. So I've literally healed my nervous system over time, so that when any external factor that triggers me, whether it is, let's say for you, it might be traffic, and it certainly used to be for me, I feel that same. I feel that surge, but I'm able to quickly regulate with my breath. And now I have that confident control on my nervous system just through the breath. The other interesting benefit of cold plunging that I didn't expect was it is a very deep meditative opportunity. What happens is when you get past that whole storm, electrical storm of the nervous system, panic, fear, all the things that come up, and you settle in, when you are in that cold state, you have no choice but be present. I'm not sitting in the water worrying about the grocery list or what do I have to work on later today. I am in full centered presence. And some of the deepest meditations I have are in that cold water. It just literally clears everything. So for me, it's become a daily practice. I have, a cold tub at my home, and my mid-afternoon, if I'm home, is to just go in there. I get that nervous system reset. I get all that dopamine. And then I have that real space that we just talked about. That's one of those tools for me to create that space to reset. And then I come back into my work environment feeling refreshed, rejuvenated, and
ready
really
to
clear.
go. It's like a new day.
Our audience should know that whenever we go visit Brian, we have to bring our swimsuits, because we're going to that cold tub. Whether we like it or not, we're going in that cold tub. Now, Andrea,
but hold on. I want to tell you a story before we move on.
Sure.
Brian, I've been to a few of your amazing retreats. Brian also hosts some very incredible retreats, and we'll share all that information with you. But he did a cold plunge, and I'll tell you, I almost didn't go when I knew that was part of the retreat. And the first retreat I went to, I didn't go in. I suck it out, and I didn't do it. And I'll tell you, I was so mad at myself that I created another opportunity to do it another time. And I did do it. And I've been doing it occasionally since. And the last time I did it was in Whistler. And as you guys know, my stomach is not great. I have gut issues. And while I was in Whistler, I couldn't adhere to the diet that I should be 100% of the time. So I was having some gut issues. And I decided to do the cold plunge. And I got to tell you, after that, I think I did the cycle 3 or 4 times. I was completely better. And it was fine for weeks after that. So there's also it's not just mental, it's also physical healing that you can receive from this cold plunging.
Well, let's explore that a little bit then. Okay, Brian, what are your thoughts on that? Is there a link between all the mindfulness, the meditation, the cold plunging? We're well aware of the mental and the emotional benefits. Can we talk a little bit about how it manifests into the physical side?
Yeah. So there's, I guess, two things you mentioned, mindfulness and cold plunging. Just to close off on the cold side, all kinds of physical benefits with the cold. And Andrea, I presented recently and brought all the latest science that I could find for cold plunging in. And there's more all the time in terms of people, autoimmune diseases going away. There's these cold shock proteins that are released in the body that clean up the cells. So there's almost, when you get in, there's almost a retraction and then the response back is to rebuild stronger. So there's so many mechanisms. I can say this as well, which is a fascinating point, is that I have not had a cold in 5 years. So I'm the guy that goes out every winter. My white blood cell count's through the roof. That's one of those benefits. There's so many benefits of it. So doing hard things, it's called hormesis. So it's like fasting is a form of hormesis. Sauna is hormesis. Cold plunging is hormesis. This is putting a controlled stress response on the body, and we adapt through more strength, physically and mentally, because mentally, you just don't want to do any of these hard things. I'd rather just, grab a donut and hit the couch, right? But I mean,
like warm and cozy in a hot shower.
Hey, we love our comfort and pleasure, right?
Yeah,
absolutely.
Because it's
and
easy
just getting
and it keeps
outside
us
of
really
that.
comfortable.
Yeah.
What's familiar.
Yeah. So it's a beautiful controlled stress response. And I'll just say, physically on the mindfulness side as well, when you're in touch with your body more than, typically like I'll Pete, we did spend a lot of time in the weight room back in the day. And
yes, we did.
It was just like, how heavy can we go, bro? Right? It's like just keep pushing and pushing. And sure, you can be big and strong just by physically picking things up and putting them back down again. But mindfulness brings in a holistic approach because I'm more in tune with my body. I'm actually more in tune with how am I actually feeling today, not just how do I think I'm feeling. And so when I'm tuning into that body, I find that it creates more of a holistic image. And even just the tuning into that, almost the visualization side of it. And that part may be hard to quantify, but even just using another bodybuilding reference, like Arnold, visualizing his biceps as mountains. When I'm really connected to my body, I feel that there's a greater balance. I feel I stay leaner, my energy is greater, and I just feel more well-being overall. So the mind and the body, it's just really one thing that works together. And so whatever you're doing to one, you're working to do to the other as well.
What's interesting is what you're saying right now is akin to what elite athletes, Olympic athletes and professional athletes that, make millions of dollars a year doing physical things have proposed or have professed over the years, which is a link between the body and the mind, right? And what you're saying to our audience right now and to us is that you don't have to be an athlete. You can still get the benefits of this mind-body connection by practicing the things we just talked about, and it will make a humongous difference in everybody's lives. You don't have to be a $700 million baseball player. You can be a mom of 3 kids. You can get tremendous benefit out of this thing.
Absolutely. One of the things that creates difficulty for us physically is the hormones of stress. So we'll just use like cortisol, for example. So if I'm always in a low grumbling level of stress that I've just accepted as my baseline. So I'm always a little bit off. I'm always a little off center. It's not chronic stress to the point where I'm going to burn out and break, but I've got that
edge.
I got my foot on the gas and I'm kind of tapping the brake at the same time with my body. And so when we become aware of that, and we can really start to tune into that. There's times, I carry stuff in my lower belly, for example, that when I'm feeling a little anxious or a little fear or something.
That's interesting.
I've learned to tune into that. And when you tune into
That's cool.
it wants to come up and dissipate. And I can feel it. I can actually visualize it as a color. So it's a dark circle, and I'll start to let it go and release, and it starts to move up through my whole body, and then it lets go, and I've just created all this space. So when I'm not releasing cortisol, I'm not going to be carrying as much belly fat, for example, just one example. But I'm also my immune system then is going to be functioning to keep me healthy. It's going to be creating equanimity, which is that balance and peacefulness within, regardless of all the shit that happens on the outside.
Oh, that's good. I like that, the dark circle, like creating like an image in your mind of that anxiety or whatever it is, and then visualizing it, expanding and releasing. That's
Yeah,
really cool.
the bodybuilders called it the mind-muscle connection, and when we used to work, and I do it in running right now too when I'm training. When you're working out, you visualize the muscle contraction, you visualize the muscles expanding, contracting as you're doing the exercise. And when I'm running, I'm also visualizing my motion, my breathing, my heart, all that kind of kins to play. So it's the same thing. It's a very similar thing. What he's talking about is visualizing your body and your energy and how that kind of moves through your body.
I have a question for you. So as we were talking before about how you can visualize, the weights you want to lift or the way that your body's feeling, or you can even visualize the way you hope that it will be feeling and create that experience physically. How does that relate to leadership? And as you guys may not know this, but Brian works with many organizations and leaders. How does mindfulness play into creating the business that you want, creating the income that you want? How does mindfulness fit in there?
Fits right in there. So, you're kind of describing emotional intelligence, which all leaders should be actively pursuing, which is a skill that we can all acquire and grow over time. It's really a wonderful leadership tool, and it composes of a number of different things. But just to take the mindfulness and the kind of the stress management piece of emotional intelligence, when we're able to self-regulate more quickly and we're able to then be in a space where we're more centered, we are more compassionate, then I'm going to be a better listener. I'm going to be a better leader. I'm going to be somebody that you can approach and feel like you can trust. When you look at leadership, how many times have you worked with somebody that if you actually trust that person, you feel they're listening to you and they care, and they're living in congruence with whatever they're preaching to you, that is great leadership. And so that's really just becoming more in tune with your own emotions. And really, mindfulness, at the end of the day, there's an acronym called COAL, which is considered the attitude of mindfulness. C is curiosity. And so bringing back that childlike curiosity. As adults, our brains are like optimization tools. So we just say, okay, this is black, this is white, moving on. But you remember when you watch your kids, when they used to play around with a little pea on their dish or something, and forever, just so curious again. So being curious with yourself. The O in COAL is openness, excluding nothing. We usually tighten things up as we become older, and this is just the way it is. But the A is the tricky one. And that's accepting pleasant or unpleasant equally. It just is. So nothing is good or bad, but thinking makes it so, is a Shakespeare quote that I love. And so whenever things start to come up, whether it's the way I'm feeling, the way I'm interacting as a leader with the people I work with, it just is. So learning just to accept things for the moment rather than just reacting instinctually creates trust. It creates leadership. And it also, again, keeps me self-regulated. And then the L is, maybe more the woo-woo one, but that's love. And that's love for myself. Because if I'm loving myself and I'm truly loving myself and I'm taking care of myself and I care about myself, I can then actually have the ability to truly love someone else.
That's beautiful, man.
I
That's
love
beautiful.
that. I have to jump in here. I'm sorry I'm talking a lot, Peter. I'm cutting you off. But when you say love, you work with a lot of men. How do men receive that direction from you?
How do men deal with how do men deal with the L word in general?
No, but let's be fair. Like women are a lot more able to use that word to give love. We're very good at giving love. We may have issues receiving love, but we're really good at giving it mostly. How do men handle that part, and how do they respond when you say things like that?
Yeah,
like love yourself.
That's a great question, and it was very polarizing for me at one time as well. I'll just use a quick example just from last weekend. I had a group of men together for it was a primal retreat. So we really went off. We did some hard things together. This was a group of men. It was just interesting how it just came together. I did not intend for this, but they were all construction business owners. They were very kind of a blue collar, rough and tumble type guys. It's a process, Andrea. Like we go out first and we work the body to exhaustion, and then we did some hot cold, contrast therapy, and then I took them through a deep breathwork session. Half of them were bawling, half of them were howling.
Wow.
They let go. And afterwards, when we shared, they all used that L word wide open because they felt safe. We created a space for them to share, to be vulnerable, and feel safe to do so. Because it doesn't matter if you're a man or a woman, love is at the core of who we are as human beings. And we all crave that feeling, but we have to be safe to do it. And there's a lot of programming from the past because big boys don't cry. Push it all down, suck it up, move on. That's how we were raised. But I feel that there, in this next generation, a lot of that stigma and trauma is starting to be broken. Men are starting to be more open to that space. It's a work in progress, let's just say, but it takes a little while to crack these big boys' hearts open. Possible.
Amazing.
I believe that. I believe it is possible. I just find it really interesting because I like, how would you approach that if you were not you and you were someone listening in? How would you approach starting to crack open or help someone to crack that part of them open?
You know what works for me really well is that I have a picture of little Brian about 9 years old. And it was at a time where I don't think I felt consistent love. And I had I didn't feel seen or heard. I didn't feel lacking some worthiness. And that picture of myself, I keep somewhere that I can see it almost every day. I have like a little script of things that I read to myself and mostly in the evening before bed. But I look at that little boy, and that consciousness behind those eyes is the exact same consciousness that's here today when I look in the mirror. And so I can look at that little boy and as a father, really have love and compassion for him. But that's me too. And so that little distinction really kind of helps bridge the gap, I think, for some of us, because sometimes we look at ourselves and we're feeling shame and guilt or whatever else is programmed into us where we get stuck in those negative vibrations. But that tied to that is very, very helpful. There's actually a book by Kamal Ravikant called Love Yourself Like Your Life Depends on It. It was interesting because he had this one technique where every time he brushed his teeth, he would just quietly repeat to himself, I love you, I love you. He'd look himself in the eye, in the mirror. I've had men do this one, for example, that it brings up tears every time. So they're tapping into something there every single time. So it's being intentional about it. It's not something that's just going to happen like, I love you, Brian. And it's doing the work, but you have to be intentional.
It's hard work. In this current climate right now, little boys, young men are looking up to some of our leaders who I don't think practice a lot of what we're just talking about today. In fact, they seem to be, the current leadership climate is almost the opposite. It's hard, it's combative, it's childlike behavior. What do you say to young people today that say, look, what we're preaching today is real. It'll take you to places that you want to be. Don't get lost in the shiny object in the future, the expensive cars, the gold, the whatever it is. How do you communicate that message?
Yeah. And the thing is, the mainstream media, all the different sources that are, what are exactly what you're describing, Pete, they are front and center. But, as you know, what we focus on expands. And so there are some wonderful leaders out there right now who are very conscious, who are leading a completely different part right now. I get there's a lot of fear in the world right now, the scarcity mindset. I don't like to use the term sheep, but there's a lot of people following and are trapped in fear right now who are looking at some of these leaders who appear to be holding all this power. At the end of the day, love, joy, all those things is for me, it's the top. It's what it's about. We have to just be able to survive in this world, but there are some wonderful leaders. There are some really great ones. And I think the more that you start to lean into that, the more that those people arise. And I would just say for anybody listening to this right now as well, people that have the news on, if you're, the people that love to have, like if you're in the GTA and you've got TP24, City Panic 24 on, pay attention to your nervous.
I love it.
Pay attention to your nervous system, right? Because it's sensationalism, and it's meant to keep us in fear and keep us attached to it. They're not talking about feel good stories, but there's a lot happening out there, and so that's a great question, Pete. That's a very difficult thing because especially for a young man.
Exactly.
Yeah.
What's next for you, bud? What's next for you? You're doing a lot of great things.
Just more, I think more of the same, brother. I would say, this year I'm doing bigger festivals and some more talks. I'm with an agent to do even more talks as well.
Amazing.
So that's happening. Some wonderful collaborations happening. So what I've found is that I've been involved in a couple of different men's groups, all men like myself. Some of them are way beyond where I'm at in terms of their experience and following. We're all coming together. It seems like there's this non-competitive spirit to really help men in particular grow and evolve. And so that's really exciting. And there's, I have a retreat in September. There's 180 men already signed up for.
Ooh.
Amazing.
Would Peter like to be the 181st man to sign up?
I'm coming for you, Pete. I'm coming for you, brother.
Love it.
Yeah. So just more scale, more impact, Pete, and then continuing to do the work on myself as well, of course.
Fantastic.
I think that's a really important point, is that we can all tell people what to do and how to do it, but it really starts from within, like doing the work yourself and doing the work and not telling people to do things you haven't done first.
Yeah, perfect.
So
But this
that's
is
really cool.
But this is a great segue, though. Brian, if you could tell the audience what you're doing right now, how they can get connected with you, etc. And of course, we'll make sure those details are in the show notes. Can you tell our audience?
Sure, yeah. Everything that I'm working on is pretty much on my website, briancoones.com, and Brian Coones on social media. And so that's where I share any events or retreats, and you can learn more about that there.
Brian, this conversation has been awesome. There's so much more I want to talk to you about. Like, it's never enough time, but I want to protect your time as well. So thank you so much for sharing your wisdom and mindfulness, stress management, and just creating a life that you love. I know our listeners will really take away so much value from this, and I know that they're going to be knocking down your door to learn more. If you have any questions for us or Brian about anything we've spoken about, please feel free to reach out to us and we'll direct you, or you can also find all of his information in our show notes. We would really love you to connect. So thank you for being here, and until next time.
That was awesome. Thanks, Brian. Appreciate it.
Awesome. Thank you. Love you guys.
Bye.
Thanks for listening to Lovesaranghae with us, Peter and Andrea. If you've enjoyed this episode, leave us a review. Your ratings and reviews help more people like you find our show. Don't forget to subscribe so you never miss an episode, and share this podcast with someone you think would love it. Until next time, love yourself, love one another, and love the world.